We're learning the first Sikha of Parshas Boy in Chelek Chaf Aleph on page 55. The shir today is being learned L'Nishmas Rabbi Yosef Binyamin ben Rab Menashe Koltman. Oifem Pasik Kai Oma Hashem Kachatzais Halayla Ani Yotze B'toich Mitzrayim. Moshe Rabbeinu says that the Eibishter said that Kachatzais Halayla, I will be going out the middle of Mitzrayim. This is for Makis Becheres. Bringt Rashi zwei Pirushim in Kachatzais Halayla. So Rashi brings two interpretations in the meaning of the words Kachatzais Halayla. Aleph, the first pshat is Pshutai liyashvoi alefanav, is the simple pshat to explain it in the context of the pasuk. As the taich for Kachatzais Halayla is Kehecholek Halayla, when the Nacht zerteilt sich. Kachatzais Halayla means when the night is divided. What's the chiddush here in what Rashi is saying? So Rashi explains, was leitem pirish is ein chatzais shem davar shel chatzi. The word chatzais is not a noun defining the time, midnight, halbe nacht, nor sezapula. Rather, it's a verb, and kachatzais is the chaf is when the night divides. When Rashi bringt of kamadugmais, Rashi brings examples where we see that you can translate kachatzais in this way. Veis, another pshat Rashi says, Rabbi Seinu Darshu, our sages expounded and explained as follows, K'moi ka b'chatzais halayla. It's like the pasuk would be saying, approximately at midnight. V'amru, and they explained, why is Moshe Rabbeinu saying approximately at midnight? Shama Moshe kachatzais, the mashma samuch loi. Moshe Rabbeinu uses this expression of kachatzais. And he's saying that it could be approximate, sometime near midnight. Shema yitu etzagnine parei, because maybe the astrologers of Parei will make a mistake in the time when Makis Becheres happens, and they may think that it wasn't exactly at Chatzais. V'yamru Moshe badoyu, and they'll say that Moshe Rabbeinu is a liar. So now, according to this pshat, Chatzais is the shem davar shel chatzi. Chatzais is a noun, midnight, halbe nacht. Und das, was Moshe hat gesagt, kachatzais. Samachloi, the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu says with a chav, kachatzais, which means approximately midnight, und nicht bachatzais b'diok, and not precisely at the time of midnight, is weil hat choshish gewend, because he was concerned, shema yituchulu v'yomer Moshe badoihu. So the astrologers should not come and accuse him of being a liar. Und danach is Rashi Messiahim, leit kame girsais. Then Rashi concludes, and this is according to some versions of Rashi, and this is the version that Rabbi will be explaining here in the Sikha. Aval HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yedeya Ita V'Regov. The Eibishter knows his times, his moments. Omar Bachatzais. What the Eibishter says, when the Makkah will happen, the Eibishter did say that it will be exactly at midnight. Later, Mizrahi. So the Mizrahi here explains regarding this Rashi. Unoch Mefarshim, and other commentaries as well. As the Schwierigkeit im Pasuk, was Rashi kommt verempferen mit die zwei Pirushim. What is the difficulty with the words of the Pasuk here that Rashi is coming to answer with these two interpretations? Is al derech with the Kashi in Gemara. Similar to the question that the Gemara asks regarding this Pasuk here. Mi ekesveike kamishmaya. Is there any doubts in heaven by Hashem? And that is as follows. Oibn zal zagen, as chatzais is shem davar shel chatzi. If you'll say that the word chatzais is just a noun, midnight, darf es kommen as the chaf from kachatzais is a chaf ashir. If so, the word kachatzais is a chaf that relates to the time period. Wie die Dugmais valacha bringt, examples as the Mizrahi brings, ka'asaras, hayamim, ka'efas ha'orim. Das heißt, and that would mean here, ungefähr be'erach arum the Zeit von chatzais. Approximately midnight. Heißt es doch, and if it means approximate, so what that means is, as a davar mesupik. It's a doubt. Man weiß nicht im Genehmsman, when das wird vorkommen. It's unknown what's the exact time when Makis Becheres will happen. Und azai kann man doch nicht sagen, klapp in Meile. And of course, this can't be said when we're speaking about the Eibishter, bringing this Makkah. Then break Rashi zwei Pirushim. So to answer this question, Rashi here brings the two Pirushim. Aleph, kachatzes halayla meant kehecholek halayla, when the night is divided. Was bei a pu'ule, badait chav ka'asher. So if it's not a noun, but it's a verb, so here the chaf is not approximate, but chaf just means when. Kachatzes halayla ka'asher yecholek halayla, when the night will be divided, which is punkt in halbe nacht, exactly at midnight. So according to this pshat, it comes out as this is in them that gewen kein sofik, that there is no doubt about this. It's exactly when the night is divided. Beis, the second shot Rashi says, Kachatzais meintake kimoi kiba chatzais alaylo demashma samachloi. It's as if it says kiba chatzais, which means approximately midnight. Moshe hat gesagt, and the reason Moshe Rabbeinu says this, Shema yituchulu, as Rashi explains, so the astrologers shouldn't make a mistake and then accuse him. Aber der Eibishter hat gesagt, bachatzais dem genoyim zman. The Eibishter says, bachatzais, that the Makkah will come in the exact time of midnight. That's the simple understanding of the two Pirushim here in Rashi. However, what we need to understand here is as follows. Was is the hechrich zu sagen? What forces us to say, as when the chaf from kachatzais is a chaf hashir, that when the word, or the letter that is chaf, is a chaf regarding the timing here, is yichuyev shiyeh adavim mesupik. That automatically means that there's some kind of a doubt regarding the timing. Why can't we say, as sagt, kachatzais chaf hashir, nitzali basofik bedover, that Moshe Rabbeinu is saying that the Makkah will come approximately chatzais, not because there's a doubt when exactly chatzais is, nor val das v'takefakum in samach lachatzais, because Moshe Rabbeinu is saying that the time of the Makkah is not precise. It'll be approximately at chatzais. Maybe that is the time that Hashem said and chose, and that's what Moshe Rabbeinu is saying. Ubefrat, more specifically, wie the Levush fragt. The Levush asks about this here. Even a human being that uses this term and says chaf, or like here, kachatzais, which is a chaf regarding the timing, it doesn't necessarily mean that he's using this chaf because he has some kind of a doubt about this. Sometimes when you speak about something or you're speaking about a timing, so you use the term chaf because the exact precise timing is irrelevant, so therefore you say chaf about, approximately. With mispar and prati and regarding certain numbers. Sometimes when you round out a number to a number like 100 or tens or whatever it is, so you're using an approximate number because the details or percents are not relevant. So that is even by a human being. How much more so we could say by the Eibishter that over here, kachatzais just simply means that the Eibishter says the Makkah will be approximately al chatzais. The time, the pashtus for was man kann sehen sagen is a simple reason why you can't say that here would be steht weiter in Pasuk, because later on the Pasuk tells us regarding when the Makkah happened. And it was at midnight, exactly when the night, half night, that's when Makkah's Becheres came. As Makkah's Becheres is given genoi b'chatzi alayla und nit samach lachatzais. It happened exactly at midnight and not approximately at midnight. So that can't be the pshari of kachatzais that Hashem is saying that it will happen approximately. Es ist aber nicht mistavet zu sagen, as das ist der Hechrich von Rashi da. However, it's not logical to say that this is the proof for Rashi, for the pshat that he's saying here regarding the chaf of kachatzais. Warum? Oi, die ganze chaf von Rashi is von spätedigen Pasuk. Weil hier b'chatzi alayla, if the whole proof of Rashi comes from the later Pasuk, where it describes when Makkah's Becheres happened, but Rashi gedacht herabbringen den Pasuk b'pirush da. So Rashi would have quoted that Pasuk in his Pirish over here to prove this. Vigeret kam upon him, as already explained many times, as Rashi b'pirusha la Teire, far lastig nit auf a pasuk was the Ben Chamish had noch nit gelernt. Rashi does not rely on a pasuk that comes later, that the child learning Chumash for the first time did not learn that pasuk yet. Ubefrat, and especially as frier from pasuk in Parshas Lech, earlier on, there's a pasuk in Parshas Lech Lecha where it says Vayicholek aleim laila, and the night was divided, bringt Rashi arab from Medrash Agada. So there Rashi says, from what it says in the Medrash, Shenechla kalayla, the night is divided, and the Chetzioi Hasheni, the second half of the night, Nishmar lachatzais laila shal Mitzrayim, is being kept for the midnight in Mitzrayim, which means the highness, we already learned from that Rashi, as the Chatzais laila shal Mitzrayim, that the midnight here in Mitzrayim, by Makkah's Becheres, is nicht verbunden nafke mit dem Rega von Chatzais Laila. It's not necessarily specifically regarding the exact point of midnight. Nor mit dem Chetzioi Hasheni in allgemein. It's the second half of the night, which is the Chatzais Laila of Makkah's Becheres. So it doesn't have to be exactly, it could be approximate sometime from the second half of the night going forward. Hat doch Rashi sicher gedacht herabbringen, da den Pasuk Vayihi b'chatzi alayla geimer. So if Rashi has a proof only from the pasuk later, where it says Bachatzi, that it was exactly midnight, definitely Rashi would have to quote that pasuk here to prove that it means exactly and not precisely. So Bibalt, as Rashi bregnet den pasuk, if Rashi does not quote that later pasuk, und schreibt in ersten Pirish, Zehu pshutei liyashvoi lefanov, this is the simple pshat of the pasuk here, which fits into the context of this pasuk, is mashma, it seems, as pshutei from dem pasuk, mitzadatzmai, that it's a simple reading of this pasuk, when you read it for itself, is machriach to taichin kehecholek alayla. This forces us to say that kachatzais means when the night is divided and not a noun and approximately chatzais alayla. So what's the hechrech over here in this pasuk itself? Additionally, we have to understand in Rashi the following points here. Aleph, number 1. Mit was ist der erste Pirish von Rashi mehr pshutai wie der zweite Pirish? Welcher Rashi ruft an drash? In what way is the first pshat Rashi brings more the simple understanding of the pasuk than the second, which Rashi refers to as a drash? So seemingly there are just two options in understanding the words kachatzai salayla, which are both in the pshat of the pasuk. You can't suggest and say as follows: as lafi pshutai is ein chatzais shem davar shel chatzi. That in the simple meaning of the word chatzais, it's not a noun. And seemingly this is the way the words of Rashi read when Rashi says, this is the simple understanding to explain the context of the pasuk. And the reason why this is more simple is since, according to this pshat, the word kachatzais means when the night is divided, a verb, and not a noun, because chatzais is not a noun. As ein chatzais shem davar shel chatzi is an isinistam of zeh pshuta. So the fact that it's not a noun is the reason why this is more of the simple pshat. So we can't say this. It's a mistake. Weil der Wort chatzais steht zweimal im Mikra. The word chatzais, it says already twice in Psukim, in Nach actually. And in Beidar is chatzais shem davar shel chatzi. And in both places, chatzais actually is a noun. And therefore we must say, as mit loshen zeh pshutai she'ein chatzais shem davar shel chatzi meint Rashi. So here when Rashi says that this is the simple pshat of the pasuk, and then Rashi adds that chatzais is not a noun. So what does Rashi mean by this? Kedei liyashvoi alefanav loit pshutai. In order to explain the context of the pasuk here, in its context, simply we're going to have to say a novel, I think, we'll be forced to say that in our case it's an exception and chatzais is not a noun. Not that because it's not a noun, therefore this is the pasuk pshat. No, the opposite. That there's the context of the pasuk, and therefore we're forced to say that here it's not a noun. So if so, we come back to the original question here. Hein vibalt as dort wo steht chatzais, is this Hashem davar shel chatzi? Usually when it says chatzais, it is a noun. As the pshutai kachatzais da is not Hashem davar shel chatzi. So why should we say that here kachatzais is not a noun, half night, midnight, nor kehecholek alayla, when the night divides? There's no other example in the Torah where you find the word kachatzais used in this context or in this meaning of a verb. Und der Pirish, as das meint, samach lachatzais, is not an initial drash. And the second pshat, that it means kachatzais, meaning a noun, and the chaf means approximately midnight, that is only a drash. Und afal pi, as lefi zeh darf man sagen, as Moshe hat gesagt, kachatzais, kedei zu bewahren, Hashem yitu chulu. Even though according to the second pshat, we're forced to say a different point, that Moshe Rabbeinu said chaf because he was concerned that its tagnine pare may make a mistake about the timing. So maybe that's the reason why it's not so simple in the context of the pasuk. But that's also not true. It's just an inyan uchshash was hatan ort oich lederach hapshat. But seemingly this concern and this idea that its tagnine pare would make a mistake has room in the simple understanding of the pasuk, and that, so therefore why not explain the pasuk this way? Why are we saying that this is a drash? Beis, another point here, another question here is as follows. Was meint Rashi in zweiten Pirish? What does Rashi mean here in the second Pirish when he says Shema yitu chulu v'yoimru Moshe badoihu? That its tagnine pari may make a mistake and say that Moshe Rabbeinu was a liar. Pretty strong accusation. Favazal Moshe on them and dem chashash von Shema mitazah zicherkeit. If it's only as Rashi himself says, a concern that maybe, but then Moshe Rabbeinu is sort of accepting this with such a certainty. Ubemele, when alle Becheres, Bevasach Ashtarben, when all Becheres are going to die suddenly and simultaneously, like the Cheshma from the Tzdagnine Paris Samach Lachatzais, and according to their calculation of Paris astrologers, it'll be approximately Chatzais, unit Genoy in the Rega von Chatzais, and not the exact moment of Chatzais, that Menzagen as Moshe Badoihu, they'll accuse Moshe Rabbeinu of being a liar, even after they see this unbelievable miracle of them all dying simultaneously at one moment. Bis zum Mishane sein, Loshen Hashem b'chatzais, und sagen kachatzais. This is such a concern for Moshe Rabbeinu to the point that he's ready to change the way Hashem said it, b'chatzais, to kachatzais. What's the basis of this level of concern that Moshe Rabbeinu had to this degree? Gimel, the third question here is, in the Msiyim from Pirish Rashi, Rashi concludes, Aval HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yedea Ito V'Regov, the Eibishter knows his times, his moments. So Amma B'Chatzais, the Eibishter said that it will be at Chatzais, precisely at midnight. Isn't it move on? With this addition, it's not in the story. Vigeret, Kama Pamin, it was already explained many times. As Afilav and Rashi bringt Medrash Chazal, is enorm meitig the inyonim was an miyashiv divrei mikra on hobnan art al derech pshat. Rashi only brings medrashim when it's relevant for pshat, when it explains something in the pasuk. So darf man verstehen benitten die dann. If so, what we need to understand here when Rashi quotes this detail, afapi as der is genommen geworden von Rabbi Seinu. Yes, this is taken from what it says in the Medrash. Was ist aber der hechrich al derech pshat? Zu sagen, as a Kadosh Baruch Hu Amma B'Chatzais. What, however, forces us to say that this is true, that here the Eibishter did say B'Chatzais, exactly Chatzais. Was lefi zeh darf man sagen, as Moshe hat mishane gewähnt mit die Burish al Kadosh Baruch Hu. And therefore we must say that Moshe Rabbeinu changed of the words that Hashem said, that it will be precisely at Chatzais. Vi mefarshim zenen in dem Meidach, and the mefarshim speak about this. What forces Rashi to say this? Then ken doch lernen, we could interpret over here when Moshe Rabbeinu says kachatzais. As the Eibishter had gesagt Moshe zu ansagen Parei in kachatzais, that Hashem himself also said and commanded Moshe to tell Parei that the Makkah will take place approximately at chatzais. Mitzad demselben Tam Gufe, with the same reason that Moshe Rabbeinu himself was concerned about. Shema yituchulu, because if you're going to say bachatzais, they made a mistake regarding the time, and then they'll accuse him of being a liar. So what's the source in Pshat that Rashi says that Hashem did say ba chatzais? Dalia, the fourth and final question here, and what Rashi says, Pravos is Rashi meitik from Pasuk oich dem Vord halayla. Why is Rashi in the Dibur HaMaschal, which is always the key to understand what Rashi is coming to address, why does he bring the word halayla as well? L'chayres and embedded pirushim nor beneged dem Vord kachatzais. Both interpretations of Rashi are coming to explain the word kachatzais, whether it means kehei cholek, when it's divided, or the kemay kabachatzais, or it means approximately midnight, as the Ra'am and the Mefarshim say that it's the chaf of this word that Rashi has a hard time with. Okay, so we have many questions here on the Rashi. In general, to understand what's the difference between the first and second pshat, why the first pshat is more simple than the second, and Bechlal, a whole union over here that Moshe Rabbeinu changes from what the Eibishter said when we have an option of just learning the pasuk in the simple pshat that Moshe Rabbeinu is saying that the Makkah will happen approximately chatzais. Maybe that's what the Eibishter said to Moshe Rabbeinu as well, and everything could just be understood and explained clearly and smoothly without all of these different interpretations. So we'll understand this by first paying attention to a certain diak, the words that Rashi says here when he describes the first piddush that he brings. And Rashi says, Zeo pshutai liyashvai alefanov. This is the simple pshat, and this explains the context of the pasuk. The l'chayr is the sayyita lashon. Seemingly this is an extra emphasis regarding the first pshat. Rashi had gedav zogin, but kolashayne bekama makaymis bepirushay. Rashi could have simply said, as he usually does, Zeo pshutai, this is the simple pshat, and then Rabbi Seinu darshachulu. Our sages darshan as follows. Why is he adding that this is the simple pshat in the context of the pasuk? Now the mid dated Rashi on. With this, Rashi is implying or showing us as the schwerigkeiten the werte kachatzais halayla, the difficulty here with the words kachatzais halayla velacher is meitik, which again is the key. These are the words that Rashi brings in his Dibur HaMaschal. Is nit mitzad and pirish from word kachatzais. It's not regarding the word kachatzais itself, the chaf that there is in the word chatzais. And also not, As the Ra'am says, that the problem here is, like the Gemara asks, how could you say that there's a suffix, there's any thought by the Eibishter exactly when the Makkah will take place? That's not the main point Rashi is addressing. Rather, if you look at the broader context of what the pasuk is talking about over here, the simple explanation of the words here has to explain it in relation to the whole broader context of the pasuk here. As the vertige chatzes halayla soll na reinpassen in klodes teichen inyan sheba mikra, has to fit into the whole context of the psukim here, and that's the question that Rashi has with the words kach chatzes halayla. It doesn't fit in with the whole context of the psukim here. Why is that? The beard in them. So the explanation of this is as follows: learn the pasuk. From Ko Yomer Hashem Kachatzos Alayla Ani Yotze B'Soich Mitzrayim. When the pasuk says, Moshe Rabbeinu is saying, the Eibishter is saying that Kachatzos Alayla, I will come out into Mitzrayim. Stellt sich gleich a Shaila Pshuta. So immediately there's a very simple question. Lamay nafken minute ansagen as das Ani Yotze vet vorkommen Kachatzos Alayla. What relevance is there in this detail that the Eibishter says that the Makkah will take place at midnight? Why is that detail important at all? You can't just simply say, as the mit or the Eibishter stam gewollt mit dir sein Pare in dem Zman von der Makkah. That this is just another detail. Eibishter wanted to notify Pare, not just about the Makkah itself, but also this detail, the timing of when the Makkah will happen, even if there's no gain or point in this. So we can't say that. Weil bei Reuva Makkis hat der Eibishter nicht bestimmt dem genauen Zman, wenn der Makkah wird vorkommen. We see that by most Makkahs, the Eibishter does not give any timing of when the Makkah will happen. Now, there are some that the Eibishter does say a time, but over there's a reason. Afila by Dever, Borod, and Arbe. 3 of the Makkahs where the Eibishter does give the timing of when it will happen is by Dever and Arbe. Over there, by these 2 Makkahs of Dever and Arbe, hat der Eibishter gegeben dem Tag Machar und nicht den Tag. Over there, Hashem gives the time of a day. He gives them a time till tomorrow when the Makkah will happen, but he doesn't say an hour in the day when it will happen. Und bei Barad, wo der Eibishter hat gesagt, Ka'es Machar, by Barad, where it's a Makkah that the Eibishter says exactly in this time tomorrow, Ukepirish Rashi Ka'es Azais Lamachar, at this time, which means Sarat Leisrita B'Kaisel Cholu, he made a mark in the wall that when the light of the sun, the shade and the light of the sun reaches exactly this place in the wall, that's when the Makkah will happen. Is da time yuchot for was das is given nötig. There's a special reason why it was necessary there. As the Yare is Dvar Hashem, in order to give time for those that were fearful of Hashem, sollen wissen, dem Zman, they should know the exact timing of the Makkah, to be able to save their slaves or their cattle that they had from the Makkah of Barad. So there, by these Makkahs, there's a specific, either the Eibishter does not give the specific time, or even if he does, it's for a specific reason. But this doesn't apply over here regarding Makkahs B'chayris. So if by all Makkahs, or by most Makkahs, we see Hashem is not giving a timing, why over here suddenly is this a detail that Hashem is saying here in this Makkah? Well, to add another point, it's very strange. On one hand, it seems like Hashem is not just giving a timing, he's giving a very precise time, but at the same time, it doesn't even say which day the Makkah will take place. Only that it's going to be at midnight. So if the point is just to let him know the timing of the Makkah, Pari would never anyways know what the timing of the Makkah is. So therefore, in the broader context over here of this pasuk, we must say as follows: as a kavan in the intention of saying the timing of the Makkah kachatzais halayla is nit zu media sein dem zman kavua von der Makkah. It's not to say the exact time of when the Makkah will happen. No, das is a inyan miyuchad in oifen ve'echos Makkah. This is a unique thing, a unique detail in how the Makkah happens and in the nature of this Makkah. Kachatzais halayla weist is madgish megale as ani yotze. When you give this timing of midnight, this highlights and reveals that it's the Eibishter. As the Eibishter ba'atzma is yotze brengt the Makkah. That this is a kind of a timing that only the Eibishter himself can do. It reveals more than just the Makkah itself. Over here, this kind of timing reveals that the Makkah is coming from the Eibishter himself. Al derech wie steht frier, similar to what it says earlier, and it's also regarding a timing of a Makkah. Laman teida ki ein kashem alekenu. that when something happens in an exact time, so this also reveals that there's no one like Hashem that can do it in this exact time. So das is aber Deirish Bior, and here is where the question comes on the pasuk, and this is what Rashi is coming to address Alefanov in the broader context of the pasuk. In was bastete ilu miyuchad in dem zman kachatzes alayla arum chatzes. What is unique that reveals that this is only something that the Eibishter could do if we're talking about an approximate timing of around chatzes, as das bringt the aflo von ani yaitze. That this expresses something unusual and unbelievable that only Hashem can come out and go in this exact time. Vaderab, on the contrary, nachdem vi Parei had gesehen by Makkah's Barad, after Parei already saw it by the Makkah of Barad, as he is gekommen in the pinklichen Zman, that the Makkah came at that exact moment, in the Rega was the Rebishter had vorher gesagt, at exactly at that time that it was predicted to happen, Ka'eis, Mochar, Keshetagia, Chamel, Lekan, Yered Barad, when the sun comes to that spot in the wall, that's when the Barad comes down, that Adarabe, so now here, what happens is, this reverses this. This goes a step down. Abschwachen den Emones von Moshe zu sagen, as ani yaitze wird vorkommen kachatzes alayla. Now Moshe Rabbeinu comes and says the Makkah will happen at this approximate timing, le'erech samach lachatzes, around chatzes time. So this doesn't express the ani yaitze, something unique in the nature and the power of this Makkah that is coming from the Eibishter Adarab. It's going a level down. That here it's only an approximate timing. This is the question that Rashi has and the broader context of the pasuk here. The Rebbe is Rashi mefarish, so therefore Rashi explains as kachatzes alayla. When it says kachatzes alayla, meant kehecholek alayla. It means when the night is divided. Was leitem pirish, according to this and first main pshat of Rashi, vertake areis gebracht die Pinklichkeit von bestimmtem Zman beifin hachi meduyek. Here you see that it's the Eibishter that's bringing the Makkah in a very specific time in the most precise manner possible. Noch mehr wie bei Ka'es Machar. And this is actually more precise than the way it was by Barad when the sun is at a certain spot in the wall. Why is that? What's this meaning of Kehecholek Halayla, when the night is divided? The Chilok zwischen die zwei Efanim wie zu ausdrücken dem Zman von Chatzi Halayla. What is the difference between the two ways you can express midnight? Either you say Chatzais Halayla, which means midnight, or the Kehecholek Halayla, or when the night is divided. What's the difference how this is expressed? So it's not the same thing. So it's as follows. Chatzais Halayla ret wegen Zman mesuyam. The term Chatzais Halayla is referring to a certain time period of the night, midnight. Kehecholek Halayla, however, when you say when the night is divided, when Meshach Halayla zeteilt sich auf zweien, when there is that point in the night where the night divides into two, is metayer nitzman. It's not describing a certain period of time, a certain duration of time, not a pu'ula. It's referring to a certain act, a division. There's half of the night that's on one side and the other half on the other side, and there's a point right in between. And additionally, as the dazike pu'ula tutzachoyf nitana hemshechsman. This act of dividing the night, there is no moment or time or duration of time when that is happening. Not an anekudavensman. It's at a point of time where you can't say that this point of time belongs to one half or the other half of the night, because if it belongs to one or the other half, then the night has not been divided. It's not at that point, which is right in between. So this is a completely different thing. Chatzais Halayla means a certain point in time, in duration of time, which is referred to as midnight. But Kehecholek is when you're dividing the night, dividing one half here and one half there, then there has to be a very precise point, which is not even in duration of time, can't be measured in time at all, which is right in between. The Nukude was zeteilt die zwei Chatzai Halayla. That point that divides the two halves of the night is nit kein shuhus hemshachsman. It's not a duration of time was mekanis mesten that could be measured. And the Rabbi explains, mekanis mesten, because if it still could be measured, if it's a certain quantity of time that can be measured, darf sie oichnes chalik werden. So then you have to further divide that measure of time, that duration of time as well. Halb to the erste Chatzi Halayla, half of it belongs in the first half of the night, and the zweite halb to the zweiten. And the other half of it belongs to the second half of the night. So this is a point of time which is here thin, right at the center, which you can divide further and further, and it's an akuda, which is beyond being estimated of any period of time. Das is the Reif to for Chatzais Halayla. Ani Yaitse Geimer. This is the accomplishment of Kachatzi Alayla, which means when the night is divided, which expresses the Ani Yaitse, the Eibishter vet HaReis Gein. The Eibishter comes out, punkt in the Nekude from Kehecholek Laila. He comes out exactly at that point when the night divides. Varom is Yedei Itavurgov. Only Hashem himself knows his times and his moment and is able to identify that exact point in the middle when the night is divided, and that's when Makkos B'Choros happens. That's the big Maila that the Chatzos Halayla is bringing out over here in the context of the pasuk, that it's part of the great union of Makkos B'Choros expressing the Ani Yaitse, the Eibishter and the Makkah. As a not move on, but now Rashi still brings a second pshat. So what's the difficulty with the first pshat? So what's not understood over here is as follows. If this is the whole point, to say that the Eibishter is saying that it's going to happen exactly at that point of the division of the night, so then why would the pasuk use this term of kachatzais that could be interpreted in one of two ways? It could either mean, as Rashi explains in this pshat, when the night is divided, but chatzais usually means midnight, and kachatzais usually actually means approximately, which makes the opposite point. V'adarab, on the contrary, the pshat do daf onkumen tzerayis. The first pshat here, the kachatzais, is not like the usual pshat, and it means when the night is divided. So you need proofs for this, because it's not the usual pshat. Und eine is nicht genug, even one raya Rashi brings is not enough. Und die Reihe sind nicht im Ganzen gleich zu nitten die dann, and the proofs that Rashi brings, as the Mefarshim point out, they're not all exactly similar to our case here. Warum beide reden wegen einer Kudas Haschole, was hat noch gehabt, a Hemshech, am Meshech Zman, ois Nekuda. Because in all those cases, they speak about a certain point of a beginning, where there is a certain continuation that follows. It's a certain duration of time. It's not speaking about a point beyond any duration of time. Mashen kein da is geblieben an a kude mamish kanal. By contrast over here, kehecholek means when it's divided, and it's that point in between the two halves of the night. So the examples that Rashi bring are not exactly the same as here. So b'shas, so that we can sagen bepashtus mamish ba chatzos mit a beis. When the pasuk could have just simply said ba chatzos with a beis, which would mean exactly at midnight, and that would express clearly, unequivocally, that this is Ani Yaitse, the Eibush is coming and bringing the Makkah exactly at this time. So why is the pasuk using this term kachatzais that leaves room for an opposite interpretation that is saying that it's just approximate? The far muss Rashi onkommen zu a zweiten Pirish. So therefore, Rashi must bring also a second shot over here. Chotch is nit glattig al derech pshat, even though it's not a simple and smooth explanation according to the pshat of the pasuk. Mashenken a drash, but according to drash, we expound the pasuk into explaining it this way. As Moshe hat angeheben koi omar avaya, that Moshe Rabbeinu begins saying that this is what Hashem says. Und es gleich meshane anstatt sagen bachatzos kachatzos, that Moshe Rabbeinu switched, even though he begins saying Koi Omar Hashem, that this is what Hashem says, but nevertheless Moshe Rabbeinu switched from what Hashem actually said, Bachatzais, and he says Kachatzais, that it's going to be approximately Chatzais. So that's the drash that forces us to say this, that there must be a reason why the pasuk writes Dafke Kachatzais and not Bachatzais, even though we have the pshat that Kachatzais just simply means Kehecholek Alayla, but as the Rabbi pointed out, the difficulty with that, it's a pshat that leaves room for another pshat. It's not clear. But in the Milo, the second pshat is when you say that kachatzais, the chaf is precise. There's a reason why that chaf is there, because Moshe Rabbeinu actually dafke said kachatzais to say an approximate time for the reason that Rashi brings. But Rashi then adds that even according to this pshat is HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yedei Ito V'Regov, that we need to understand here in this pasuk that Hashem knows his moments and knows his times, and that there's no doubts by heaven. And Oma Bachatzais and the Eibishter, certainly the point of the timing of the Makkah, even according to the second shot, must be that the Eibishter wants to give an exact time to express the Ani Yaitse, because that's the general context of the pasuk over here, that this must be somehow adding to the greatness of Hashem's power in this Makkah. Otherwise, there's no point of giving this timing. Und das ist Madgish, the Mani Yaitze, Beretz Mitzrayim. This is what highlights the fact that it's the Eibishter coming out in Mitzrayim. Achahar Echayim v'Goyman is killing every B'chair, regardless of who he is, the ones that, even the servants, that the slaves that work by the mill. Because otherwise, is nit dog kein tam zu sagen dem Zman von Chatzais Laila. There's no reason at all to mention any timing here. Kanal Siv Dal Bairach, as explained before. So this is the reason why, what forces Rashi to add here this point that HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yedeya Itav Urugov, and that the Eibishter must have said Bachatzais. We can't say, like was suggested in the questions that the Rebbe asked here, that Moshe Rabbeinu was saying Kachatzais, that the Makkah will happen in an approximate time. And the Eibishter also told Moshe Rabbeinu that the Makkah will happen in an approximate time. Because then what's the point of giving this approximate timing? What is it out over here to the Makkah? It must be that the Eibishter said an exact timing. But Moshe Rabbeinu changed to Kachatzais because of the concern that he had. But the context of the pasuk forces us to say that HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yedei Itav Urugov, and the Eibishter must have said Bachatzais. Rabbi Seinu Tuanoif, the point that our sages here are telling us in the second shot is, as when es is gekommen zum Eibishten Divrei Hashem al Parai, when es is gekommen zum Ibegeben Divrei Hashem al Parai, when it came to communicate the words of Hashem to Parai, hat Moshe mishane gewend mitzad dem Chashash Hashem yituchulo. Moshe Rabbeinu, out of this concern that they may make a mistake about the timing, changed and from Bachatzais to Kachatzais. That's what Rabbi Seinu are coming to be mechadish. But in the context of the pasuk, it's clear that the Eibishter must have given a precise time. Und sicher is das Gufe gewend im Ratzon Hashem. In this itself, that Moshe Rabbeinu switched this, it was definitely the will of Hashem, and as the Rebbe adds here in the Orah, that probably Hashem himself told Moshe Rabbeinu that when you give it over to Parai, say Kachatzais an approximate timing, even though in the pasuk it doesn't spell out that this is what Hashem said to Moshe. High time and now according to this we can understand why is this blois an initial drash. Why this Rashi brings this as a second shot and he considers it to be just a drash. Because in the simple meaning of the pasuk here, steht nit wegen zwei besondere amiris. It doesn't say in the pasuk about two different statements that HaKadosh Baruch Hu Omar Bachatzais, that Hashem says Bachatzais, and Moshe Kachatzais, and that and Moshe that it says Kachatzais. And we're forced to say so, because otherwise there's no chiddush in this timing. So this is blois and initial drash. So the fact that we're saying that there are two timings said, the timing of Bachatzais and the timing of Kachatzais, that's what forces us to say that this is only a drash. That's the meaning of the second shot that Rashi brings here. So we now understand why it's only a second shot and why it's only a drash. Now the Rebbe comes back to the point where we were at the beginning of Sivav, where the Rebbe is addressing what's the problem with the first shot, why Rashi is bringing a second shot. So here the Rebbe brings that there's an even stronger question, seemingly, that should come up when you learn the first shot. And this will actually be answered in the words and the context of what Rashi says in the second shot. He said to Mizeh, furthermore, there's a very strong question on the first shot that Rashi brings here. L'chayre is da akashe was frekt in ganzen up the Mershton Pirish. Seemingly, there's a very strong question here that completely refutes the first interpretation of Rashi, which is again Chelek halayla, that Hashem knows the exact moment, that point of between the first and second half when the night is divided, and that's when Makas B'chayris occurs. Vibalt as Chelek halayla is an akudas zman. If Chelek halayla means that point of time, was not the Eibishter kenes mechaves sein, it's not humanly possible to identify it. It's not measurable by any human being, because whatever you measure, you have to further and further divide it. So it's only the Eibishter that can know that exact point of time, or not even in time. Und a Mensch kann das nicht mafchen sein. A human being cannot identify this. Is was wird zukommen, der mit dir sein Pare, sein Chatumim, und komm Mitzrayim wegen dem. So what's added here to demonstrating the greatness of the Eibishter by giving this exact time, b'shas, as und sie alle wollen es sei, wie nicht können mechaven sein. While Parai and all those that are with Parai anyways will not be able to identify and see that exact timing that only the Eibishter could see. Das hat getroffen Punkt in der Kudev and the Laila is nachlek oder nicht. Whether it actually occurred in that exact point of time or not. It's not measurable by any human possible way, any utensil or any instrument we have to be able to measure this. So this is seemingly a question that refutes the entire first pshat. So not only is the second pshat better, but l'chayra this is the only pshat we can say. Das wird verämpft. However, this is explained and answered durch Rashi's bringen ariches lashon medrash, by Rashi bringing all the details that the medrash says. Der Mannen mention wegen wem hat den ganzen gerät, and Rashi here mentions in this Rashi in personalities that we didn't at all discuss over here, and they are Itztagnine Parei, the astrologers of Parei. Why is Rashi specifically quoting this expression of the Medrash, that the astrologers of Parei may mistake the exact timing of this Makkah? So this detail of Itztagnine Parei is also relevant for the first Pirush of Rashi. Nit Parei va'avoda v'chayetze b'zeh. Rashi does not just simply say the expression of Parei and his servants or anything like that. V'meforish b'kosav. Now, this that Rashi speaks about, it's Taknine Parei, the astrologers of Parei. So this is explicit here in the pasuk as Moshe had gerät zu Parei v'hachartumim. Moshe was speaking to Parei and his chartumim, his astrologers, or those sorcerers, v'lechazanen gewen, by ze reden, that were there when Moshe Rabbeinu was speaking to them, kedei zu beweisen below hateim. So they were there and they would try to demonstrate to Moshe Rabbeinu with their kishuv, b'shas ma'isa, they kenenes oichton and oich kol avod echo, that they can also perform these magical things with their sorcery, and all the other servants of Parei also can. So it says over here in the pasuk that there were the astrologers of Parei, but then they also say that there was kol avod echo, there was other servants over there as well. So over here, when Rashi is specific to point out that it's not only the astrologers, the chartumim, but it's, again, in the pasuk it says that they're chartumim, there's kol avadecha eile, there are other servants that were there by Parei. But here, Rashi is very specific in pointing out that it's stagnine Parei. The mistake could be made by the astrologers of Parei. So why is that relevant? Das Oib the Monte, the point mentioned before, as es kupnit zu durchsagen nekudas azman, that nothing will be added by giving this exact point of time. Because nobody could anyways know exactly what that exact point of time is das benegeh Parei v'chol Mitzrayim. That's only regarding Parei and the rest of Mitzrayim. But with one exception here. It's Tagnine Parei, the astrologers of Parei, which were chayzim b'mazalis v'kechavim, astrologers that see the stars and the mazalis. Again, that generally they could, through their powers of seeing into stars and so on, they could see precisely the truth. And over here regarding this point, also the truth in this point of time. Parei considered their opinion very much. And he followed their guidance. Generally, they did have the ability to identify exactly that moment of time and how Hashem acts within time. So over here, when in the first pshat, when Rashi says that it's Chelek halayla, that it'll be that exact point when the night is divided, which is something unique that only the Eibusher could do, it's Tagnine Parei will have the power to identify this, and therefore for them it will demonstrate the greatness of the Eibusher. However, in the second pshat, Rashi says, there still is a concern that they may make a mistake with this. They get it right in general, they do see certain things that gives them the ability to see the timing of the way Hashem does things. However, there still is a concern that they may make a mistake, and therefore Rashi says in the second pshat that Moshe Rabbeinu switched the bachatzais to kachatzais. So, but since we're talking here about the astrologers, we can understand why in the first pshat, it's not a pshat that has no place. This is a pshat that does express the Eibusher's greatness for its Tagnine Parei, and by extension, not only for them, but also Parei that accepts their guidance of what they see. Okay, but now here though, the Rebbe continues in Sivches and explains that a different approach, that even its Tagnine Parei cannot identify this exact time period. However, we can go on and say as follows. As mit dem Loshen, aval HaKadosh Baruch Hu yedeya ita v'rugov, when Rashi here says that the Eibusher knows his time and his moment, Omar b'chatzais, Hashem himself said, b'chatzais, the exact time of chatzais, meint Rashi zu merame sein, auf seinem afriedigen Pirish. Rashi here is hinting to us to remember something that Rashi already said earlier in Chumash. Oy vayechal elekim b'yom hashvi. When it says that the Eibusher completed his work in creating the world by Yom HaShvi, on the seventh day of creation, so the Eibusher completed his work at the conclusion of the sixth day. and on the seventh day Hashem rested. So what does the pasuk mean that Hashem concludes on the seventh day? Bringt Rashi Rab Maimer Rab Shimon. So Rashi brings a statement of Rab Shimon. HaKadosh Baruch Hu sheyedeya ita v'regav. Only Hashem that knows His time and His moments. Nichnas bay kechut asayra. Enters into Shabbos and completes his work like a hair's breadth, exactly at that moment, at the conclusion of the sixth day and the beginning of the second day, and the seventh day, that is. So that's a point and a preciseness of completing that only the Eibishter can know. The pshat of fun is, the meaning of this is as follows. A bas of Adam, a human being, can medayik zayin, can try to get a precise timing, al kapanim b'yigiya gedayla, with a very big effort. Afila in a rega, even with a very in one moment in time. Even the term rega, which means one moment, can be estimated. It has a certain duration of time. Where the Gemara says, "Echad mechameshes chulu is rega kememre." Rega kememre is a fifth of a certain period of time, which is areis reden drei oisius, the amount of time it takes to pronounce 3 letters, which is very short, even less than a second, but it's still a certain duration of time. So a human being that's trying to get something precisely to that moment can do it. Aber achot asayre ahor, the expression that Rashi says, achot asayre, a hair's breadth, something that's so precise to this degree, meant the kleinste nekude von zman. It means a point of time, was es überhaupt nicht in Geder von a Bas of Adam zu kennen sie Eistel und Teufel sein. This is a point in time which is impossible for a human being to identify it. Afile it's stagninen ubilam, and that's even the astrologers of Parai, and even an individual like Bilam, which the Gemara speaks about, that he was able to identify certain moments of time, and he knew Hashem's actions, and he identified. But here, this HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yedeya, this moment of time, which is beyond being measured by any human instrument, including whatever technology there is, it's not humanly measurable. So that, kanen mafchen sein, the rega from Pulis Hashem, so it's Sagninen and Bilam, that they have the ability to identify the moments and the way Hashem acts in those moments. They cannot identify this. Nor dafke der Eibishter, was is Yedeya, ito v'regov, can das mafchen sein. Only Hashem Himself that knows the exact timing, He is the one that could identify this moment. So which means now that in the second shot, Rashi over here is saying, and this is different than what the Rebbe said before, that we're talking about a moment in time, that it's Tagninin, the star, the astrologers of Parai, can identify this time, but no, Rashi is adding a Kadosh Baruch Hu Yedeya, that even these astrologers cannot identify this time. Und das deitet dann Rashi beParshasenu mit den Sagen, Aval Kadosh Baruch Hu Yedeya ita v'regov ama b'chatzais. And this is what Rashi here in our Parsha is bringing, similar point to what Rashi says in Parshas Bereshis regarding the time when Hashem finishes the work on Erev Shabbos. That it's similar over here regarding the timing of Makis B'chayris. Mit Bachatzais werd gemeint nit stam di Rega von Chatzais was Eicha ben Adam ken mechaven sein. When it says here that the Makkah comes Bachatzais, it doesn't simply mean that moment of Chatzais, which is something that even a human being could come and identify. Al Kapara b'Teirach Gadol. With great effort, it's possible to humanly identify this. B'Lashon Harayve, the Lashon that the Even Ezra says, B'Teirach Gadol b'Kelim Gedolim Shal Mechayches, some kind of instruments, some copper instruments that it's possible, or maybe today with technology, it would be possible to identify a certain moment of time in this way. No, das ist der Chut Hasayre von Chatzais. Rather, this is that Chut Hasayre. This is, we're using this analogy of a hair's breadth because that's the thinnest thing that we could think of to use as an analogy for a moment in time which is beyond being measured or identified humanly. So it's that moment of time beyond any human being to measure this, of Chatzais. But das kann mechave sein, nor HaKadosh Baruch Hu v'etzer is Yedeya ita v'regov. Only the Eibishter has the ability to identify that moment of time. So that is what Rashi here is bringing in the second shot to explain that Moshe Rabbeinu says kachatzais, but nevertheless the Eibishter said bachatzais, and the bachatzais means this exact moment of time. And that is the chiddush over here of the way this makkah happens, that it's only HaKadosh Baruch Hu which is Yedeya ita v'regov.